I'm glad everyone's here. I'm really excited to introduce my friend, Dr. James Beer. He has taught here before, but he has a long career as a statistician in industry, including at the Howard Medical School, including at SAS, which some of you have used that software, and including at Bell Labs. So he has a long career to talk about, and I hope that you will enjoy his introduction for you into statistics.
Thank you for your politeness, approach. I appreciate that. Okay. I was asked to tell you about kind of my career. And so when I agreed, that was what I agreed to. Then later on they said, oh, but put this in and put that in and make it statistical, but don't make it too deep. And I said, oh my goodness, now it's a challenge. So I figured I'd go back to the first principle and start off with what is statistics. And the problem is, when I got to that, I looked for a definition of statistics, one that I had heard years ago. And so I Googled, what is statistics? And when I Googled that, I came up with pages and pages and pages of definitions. And none of them were what I was looking for. All of them were right, and they were very different from each other. So I'm thinking, how can that be? How can it be that you got all of this stuff, and it's all different, and it's all right, and none of this is what I'm looking for? Okay, so I got started just to build my presentation. I got started. I said, well, I got to understand this before I can do anything else. So I looked to try to understand it, and I was telling Dr. Stokes, I said, I started looking and I fell down a rabbit hole, and I got kind of lost down in that rabbit hole. So my feeling is, since I got lost in the rabbit hole, I'll drag you down with me. So we're going to talk about the definition of statistics for a little bit. Then I can share some things with you from my background. So I thought I would just give you some of those definitions. So you can know, okay, what I was faced with. Now, it says, and by the way, these were not sorted. I didn't pick them out. I didn't do anything special. This is just the way they came up, okay? And don't write it down, because, no need for you to be confused for the next several years. Just kind of listen. There you go. Statistics. From Wikipedia, statistics is the discipline that concerns the collection, organization, analysis, interpretation, and presentation of data. And applying statistics to a scientific, industrial, or social problem, it is conditional to begin with a statistical population or statistical model to be studied. That sounds pretty good, right? Statistics is the study and manipulation of data, including ways to gather, review, analyze, and draw conclusions from data. The two major areas of statistics are descriptive and inferential statistics. Statistics can be used to make better informed business and investing decisions. That's an investigation. Statistics is the science of modeling the randomness present in real-world observations. That's actually pretty slick. I like that. Somebody said, I would say that statistics provides us with a rigorous toolbox to frame discussions about uncertainties that arise from using sample information. Its tools are aimed at giving us a handle on the accuracy of inferences drawn from our data. Having said that, opinions on how to do this vary. The main discussions are between frequentists and Bayesians. This multitude of views makes statistics an exciting subject with both very applied and highly philosophical sides to it. I agree that statistics is an exciting subject. You probably don't, but that's okay. We're going to show you some things that might excite you. Statistics is about the development of methods for the collection and analysis of data in order to answer specific questions in an unbiased way, so that the conclusions depend only on the data and not on any preconceived ideas. really needs only on the data and not on preconceived ideas. Okay? This is a broad discipline united by the common goal of extracting knowledge from or making decisions based on data. The discipline includes theoretical statistics and probability, which provides the mathematical underpinnings for much of what we do. Statistical methodology, the abstraction of data procedures that permit us to generalize some of our workflows, applied statistics and data analysis, the complex interactive process of wrangling, exploring, visualizing, and applying methods to data, and computing the development of the indispensable digital tools and associated abstractions needed to do our work efficiently. And what's interesting about that definition is, when you look at the author of it, what's his name, Richard Idizari, data sciences for life, data analysis for the life sciences with art. That's where that comes from. When I read that, that screams out to me, that's a computer person. That's a computer science person. That's not an mathematician, that's not a statistician. Workflows and, the emphasis on computing, that's a computer science person. And by the way, that's just one thing. I'm not going to read tons more, okay, but I just wanted you to see what I encountered when I did this, okay? Statistics is the science of modeling the randomness present in real-world observations. Statistics is about the development of methods for the collection and analysis of data in order to answer specific questions in an unbiased way, so that the conclusions depend only on the data and not on any preconceived ideas. I think he copied from the other guy. Statistics is the art of learning about phenomena through the collection and analysis of data. What separates statistics from other areas of data science is the emphasis on probabilistic modeling, as well as the understanding and incorporation of different dynamics involved in the data collection process. One of the parts of statistics is breadth, meaning that one can contribute to the discipline in dramatically different ways, whether it be developing some new methodology, exploring new computational tools, or applying novel methods to cutting-edge scientific problems. That was kind of what got me, one of the things that got me was, I can do a bunch of different stuff. And whatever I enjoy, and I can do that in statistics. So I think that was one of the things that I'll tell you the main thing in a minute. Okay? For me, statistics is the science of learning from data and making decisions using the wealth of information available to us. I think it's more liberal arts college with the goal of developing our students' ability to go out into the world and solve complex problems. What could be more of a liberal art than being able to make sense of the world around us? Statistics helps you to make sense of the world around us. Applied statistics is the craft of organizing, examining, and analyzing and drawing conclusions from and presenting quantitative data. Now, so far, I got a problem with this. He says quantitative data. Data doesn't have to be quantitative to be analyzed. Okay. As a craft, statistics combines elements of art and skill, which are in part the product of experience, with elements of science. The science derives from the mathematical sciences, which fundamentally concerns uncertain inferences based on data that are subject to randomness. Okay. And in this last definition, I included this one because up until about the year 2000, when he passed away, this definition was put out by John Tukey, who at the time was considered the world's greatest living statistician. Okay, actually met him and worked across from him for about a month or so in a place that I'll tell you about in a minute. Okay, but he said, John Tukey said, statistics is a science, not a branch of mathematics, but it uses mathematical models as essential tools. Okay, so that's 2 pages worth of definition, and none of it touched on what I was trying to get to. So, I figured I must not understand definitions. If all of those are definitions, right, and I still didn't find what I was looking for, then I must not understand. I'm just lost. So, let me look at definitions so that I can figure them out. So it turns out that there are 5 types of definitions. There's a lexical definition, which is like a dictionary definition. That's what we call a precising definition, where you take a lexical definition and say, In this setting, how does this definition apply? Precisely, so a precise definition takes a general definition and makes it more precise to that area that you're looking at. Okay, well, stipulative definition. That's when you stipulate something new, something different, and you define that something different. You define a new, an existing word in a different way. That's a stipulated definition. Theoretical definition. It's a term where you attempt to formulate a theoretically adequate characterization or scientifically useful description of the objects to which it applies. Theoretical definition is like a lexical definition, but it's more detailed, more focused, more precise. And then there's the persuasive definition. The definition put forward to influence the attitude or to stir emotions, specifically to influence the attitude of the reader or listener. That was helpful because then I realized what I was caught up with was what I was told was a persuasive definition. It wasn't one he wrote. So I said, well, again, if that's true, then part of my confusion came because I was trying to compare different kinds of definitions. So I should have been just looking at a specific kind of definition and trying to, understand that. That didn't help me, I mean, I know it now, but when I was looking, when you look for a definition, they'll say, this is a precise definition, or this is a persuasive definition. It says, here's the definition. Okay, so, what you'll find is this. Good lexical or theoretical definitions of statistics, they will have in them references. They will refer to data, they will refer to variability, they will refer to making definitions, and or refer to models. So, in those definitions that I showed you, data, the word data appears 21 times. Variability appears 5 times. Decisions 3 times. Models appears 5 times. Now, here is an example of a good definition of statistics. Sort of good. And by the way, of course I would have to say that because this is a definition from the Maryland College Division of Math and Computer Sciences website. So, it must be good, right? And here's the definition that they have there, right up front. It says, statistics is the science of making decisions in the presence of uncertainty. Okay, that's a good definition. That's a good definition. It had 2 of my words in it, right? So that's a pretty good definition. A better one might have 3 or 4 words, right? But that's a good definition. Okay, so now you can take a look and see. This is take a 10,000 foot view of these definitions. We'll have to look at them up close. But if you take a 10,000 foot view, you can see data appears all those many times in that first set of definitions I gave you, and in the second set of definitions. All those red words are data. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay? The terms relating to variability or uncertainty appear in these definitions and in these definitions, those are the blue things. Decision making appears here, and here. Those are the 3 times decision making appears. And then finally, modeling appears in those 2 definitions and in those 3 definitions. Okay? So, those are the terms that encompass a lexical definition or a theoretical definition of statistics. Okay? Now, but persuasive definitions often don't refer to technical terms at all. Now, this is a good persuasive definition of mathematics from my gold standard source, the Maryland College Division of Math and Computer Science website. Okay? Here's what it says. Mathematics is the language of science. Now, that didn't say anything about numbers and things about what you do with numbers, so on and so forth. But if you're a mathematician, you kind of like that, right? I was a mathematician. I was a math major. And I like that. You know, I said, hey, can't nobody do any science until they come to ask me. I'm a mathematician. You know? And so that was motivational for me. You know, that kind of psyched me up. But what I heard was another definition for statistics that changed my point of view. Okay? And this is the definition that I heard when I was an undergraduate student at Bell Labs in Mary Hill, Virginia. What they told me was this: statistics is the language of research. I didn't find that in there when I was looking, but that's what got me. I said, wow. That means it doesn't matter what kind of research you do. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter, you know, how deep, how wide your scope of research is. You can't communicate your research until you come past me. I'm a statistician. I grew up in New York. And so what we were saying in New York is, I'm the big dog. You don't get to come with your research until you come past the big dog. I'm the big dog. Okay, so that for me was a powerful, persuasive, motivational definition. So I changed my major and my career goals because of that. So let me tell you a little bit about me. Okay, I lived in Queens. I got married in 19. I had 2 kids at age 22. Moved to North Carolina in 1975. So I was a non-traditional student. I went to school. I was married. Had a bunch of young ones. And I couldn't hang out and go to the games and whatnot. You guys, because I had work to do and mouths to feed. Okay? I was underemployed. I was working as a janitor at Belch Department Store in Cross Creek Mall in Fayetteville. Some of y'all may know where that is. Okay? But I went to Fayetteville State University in 1976, and I went there to be a math teacher because I liked math and I really liked algebra in those days. And I was pretty good at it, you know. I was happy with numbers. I was the guy that you did not want in your class. Okay? I was the guy, you know how teachers, there'll be 40 problems in the back of the book. And the teachers will say, do the odd problems from 1 to 20, right? Okay? I was the guy who did all the problems. I did all the problems. I always did all the problems. So I like those problems. They were fun to me. And if you know something, it's kind of helpful. Generally speaking, when teachers give problems, and you got the problems in the problem set in the back of the chapter, at the end of the chapter, that problem set covers 4 or 5 topics that the teacher wants you to know. So the teacher will pick problems so that the problems that they pick are in those 4 or 5 problem sets. But they're grouped. You may not realize, but they're grouped. What that means is you can do one of them, you can probably do the other 4. But just go and do them, you know, because they're there. It's that easy, okay? That's what I do. I was that way, okay? I'm painfully introverted. You know, a group like this would scare the heck out of me when I was coming up. And by the way, you still scare the heck out of me. Don't you worry. But I learned some things about that also. I might tell you later. Okay. But I got a summer internship at Bell Labs in their statistics department. And I fell in love with statistics. That's a long story that I won't tell. But I found out that I wanted to be a statistician, but I couldn't be one because I needed graduate education to be a statistician. And that was not in my project list. I couldn't afford it. I had young to feed. By that time I had 3 young, and what you call it? And I couldn't afford it. I had young, and I needed money. I needed income. So don't come to me talking about going back to school, you know. I would, I couldn't do it, and my wife wouldn't tolerate that, According to her, I was moving off for the last 3 years in school anyway, so time to go make some money. Well, I was fortunate enough to win a Bell Labs Corporate Research Fellowship that paid my way through graduate school, paid for every book, not just that the teachers assigned, but any book I wanted, the fellowship paid for. And the fellowship gave me a stipend of $1,250 a month. That was in 1979. $1,250 a month in 1979 was about the equivalent of getting $3,000 a month today. Okay? And so with that, I was able to go to graduate school. I still had a connection with Bell Labs, so I was able to learn statistics in the best environment possible, because those were brilliant people. And so I did. I went to graduate school, and I learned statistics. And what I learned was, I learned how to speak the language of research. Because that's what I said, right? Statistics is the language of research. I'm running short. Someone has to speak it short. Statistics is the language of research. So I learned how to speak that. I learned the tools, and I learned the techniques. I learned to understand the ins and outs of data. Alright? And then I spent about 40 years consulting, teaching people how to communicate their research and doing it for them. So, what I want to do is, I'm going to share in the rest of the time we got, I'm going to share some examples of projects that I worked on, so you can see kind of the time, the different kinds of things that you might be able to do with a statistics degree. If you're interested in data, if you're interested in numbers, and you like it. If you find that you like it, you find that you're passionate about it, you should do it, okay? I learned, follow your passion. And if you're passionate about it, then you should do this. Now, unfortunately, I will share this with you from a 10,000-foot perspective. And the reason I'll share it with you is from a 10,000-foot perspective is because I worked on a myriad of projects over the last 40 years. And I have none of that information with me. So what I had to do for these, I had to go back and reconstruct the projects that I did. So I can describe them to you, I can tell you about what happened, at this level. When you start asking me about details, I may not be able to satisfy your curiosity as much as I'd like to. Because what you call it, I'm not like Francis Hagen, who left Facebook with thousands of pages of internal documents. Where I came from, that respect, and that spoke to my integrity. So I would never do that. Now, I know the world is different nowadays. I just could never do it. So, what I can do is I can tell you what I got, and we'll go through that, okay? So, here are some examples. First example, my first truly professional job outside of school, I was the Director of Research Statistics at Howard University College of Medicine. And because that's where I was, I supported the research efforts at that institution. Okay? This is a paper that we wrote based on this project, the national survey of the prevalence and risk factors of glaucoma in St. Lucia, West Indies. Okay? That was important, and you'll see why. I'm going to read the abstract very quickly, and then I'll bullet point this so you'll understand. Okay? Although blacks appear to be at higher risk for blindness from glaucoma, there is little information available on the epidemiology of this disease in this population, a black population. Using a cluster sampling technique with systematic allocation of clusters, the authors conducted a national survey of black individuals 30 years of age and older in St. Lucia. Then there's much technical stuff. A total of 1,679 individuals underwent a screening examination that included visual acuity, intraocular pressure measurements, and touch disc evaluation. Every third person had a screening field on the Humphrey Field Analyzer, a more precise evaluation of glaucoma. Individuals with either elevated IOP, abnormal CD ratio, or an abnormal seeing of visual field were referred for a definitive examination and threshold visual field. A total of 520 people were referred, identified by stringent criteria for the diagnosis of glaucoma, which requires reliable threshold visual field, abnormal by the mirror image method. 147 individuals had glaucoma, for a prevalence of 8.8% in the 30 years of age and older population. Now, okay, here are the issues. That blacks appear to be at higher risk, but there's no certainty. That's important because for research, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what you see. The question is, what do you know? We had medical doctors saying, I cannot get a whole lot of black folks in here with glaucoma, all right? That's nice, good, that's what you think, good, that's how you feel, that's what you think you saw. But is that real? Well, it's only real if it has been scientifically determined. And scientifically, there needs to be a scientific determination of that, okay? In fact, this project was funded by a pharmaceutical company. They paid money. Why? Because if there is a higher prevalence of glaucoma in black population, then if they develop medications that are effective in the black population, then all of a sudden they have a bigger market for their medication. And they make money. Now, I don't mind people making money. I really don't. You make money. But if you're helping people while you're making money, that's a good thing, okay? So, other issues. Little scientific information on glaucoma epidemiology in the black population. You'll remember that statement, okay? That means that nobody really knows what was happening in a black population. They know what's happening in glaucoma. By the way, prevalence of glaucoma in general population, and still is, between 1.5% and 2% in the general population. So nobody really knows, or did not think until this point, what the prevalence was in black population. And then there's this. There was the issue of, is Howard University qualified to do this work? There was, in those days, a real imposter syndrome mentality. The idea was, well, Howard does well at producing clinicians, producing doctors and people. But can they do real research? Can Howard really do this stuff? Okay. So, I'll tell you what's more about that in a minute. Okay. So this project, by doing this pretty complex survey, they were able to determine that the prevalence of glaucoma in the black population was 8.8% versus 1.5% to 2% in the general population, using the most stringent criteria for glaucoma, and it was possibly as high as 25% using a more liberal criteria for determining glaucoma. Now, so that now, this success increased the scientific information on glaucoma epidemiology in a black population. Nobody knew this before. Because we did what we did. Now people know that that's the case. And by the way, in the process, Howard University successfully executed and analyzed and reported on this really complex survey situation. Howard University did it. Take this book. Okay. Now, that's kind of important. Let's see. No, okay, that's right. Okay, we go back to that. Now, so the conclusion is, well, blacks are at higher risk for glaucoma than the general population. At least 4 times higher. 2 divided with 2% general pop, 8.8% in the black population. So at least 2 times higher. But it could be as much as 12 times higher at risk of glaucoma. So there is a real need for some attention in that population. Now, so it was of value to the funding entity to invest money in developing medicine for the black population. They got proof now. And by the way, what that would mean is, I'm not talking about tons of money. Okay? What that would mean is taking the existing medicine and tweaking them so that they would more effectively address the issues that confront physicians and clinicians when they are treating black people. Okay? So not a lot of money. So you invest money, then all of a sudden, your medication is preferred and is effective over the other medications out there. Okay? And then finally, we demonstrated that Howard University is qualified to do this work. The Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology nominated this work as a landmark paper in ophthalmologic research. We did it right, we did it well, and it was independently recognized as being right and done well. What I have found in my career, and things are different now perhaps, but what I found in my career, that people look at you and they say, I don't know why that guy's standing up there doing stuff. He don't know what he's doing. When I first started, the thought was, black folks can't do math. Now, I was not offended. I was challenged. You don't think I can do math? Let me show you. Okay? But when we got to statistics, it was that same thing underlying, that same idea. Black folks can't do this, and you still can't do it right. We demonstrated it here. Okay? So, that was anything. Now, I'll tell you, my career, I've worked a lot of places, I've done a lot of things, but a lot of my career has been in controversial situations, okay? Situations where there was some controversy. So, I'm going to tell you about a situation where there was some controversy. I would not be honest if I didn't. So let me tell you about that. Boom. There you go. Developing those scientific figures. Now, I worked for a time at a Fortune 8 company that makes cigarettes in Richmond, Virginia. Now, I won't tell you the name of that company, but if you know anything about the area, then you know who I work for. Okay? When I went there, I was castigated. You know, how can you, with a degree in biostatistics from the leading school of public health in the South, and one of the 3 top schools in public health in the country, how can you work for a cigarette manufacturer? Well, I don't smoke, I've never smoked. My immediate family doesn't smoke and has never smoked. But I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in Wilson. And Wilson, North Carolina, in those days, the tagline was, the world's greatest tobacco market. Okay? So I've always had a respect for tobacco and what tobacco does. By the way, and for those of you all who don't, I understand, but just to share with you, Duke University, which many people consider to be the Ivy League of the South, Duke University was funded by and founded by people with tobacco money. So there's a little something to that. Now, so because I had respect for them, then I did not count it less of me for me to go in and do what I do. So that's what I do, all right? So, they wanted to develop some fire safety cigarettes. What this background tells you is that as early as in 1929, there was a cigarette fire that caught the attention of a congresswoman who said, "We gotta do something about this." So, in the early 1930s, some researchers said it should be possible to create a cigarette that will not cause fire. Nobody thought of it. It was just totally blown away. Okay? Then, in 1984, the Cigarette Safety Act started funding research on how to create such a cigarette. And that was because then attention started coming to it. And when attention started coming to this area, then people started doing things not so finally, the cigarette manufacturers and the legislators got together and said, okay, there has to be a compromise. So the compromise, you guys develop this thing and show continuing progress forward, developing this fire safe cigarette. So that's kind of what we did. And what they came up with was something called a self-extinguishing cigarette. Alright? You all have seen cigarettes, so you know it may or may not have a filter. But there's a tube of tobacco encircled with paper. That's what you smoke. The idea is that you would put less porous band in the paper. The less porous the paper is, the harder it is for the paper to burn. And if you do it exactly right, then when a person is smoking, they will smoke all the way through and won't make a difference at all. But if the cigarette is not being smoked, when the fire gets to that less porous region, it will go out. That's the idea behind the fire safe cigarette. Okay? So, at that point, like I said, no clear answers were available. This was a research project. You had to get to what would work. Then it was a development problem. And how do we create this thing that we believe will work this way? Okay? And the solution to this had to be both technically feasible, in other words, it had to work, and commercially feasible. So the fact that it worked couldn't stop the company from earning money. The point there that I'll try to mention a little bit later. Okay, now there was a high level of attention to this project from both regulatory and legislative bodies. So time is of the essence. So how do we address that? The research indicated that those dense areas, the speed bumps, could extinguish the cigarette if it was not actively being smoked. So that was the research. But, and then, to figure that out, several classes of what we call experimental design were executed. And we did those so that we could determine the optimum density of those less porous bands. In other words, they got to go out when it's not being smoked, but they got to keep burning when it is being smoked. The optimum configuration and number of those less porous bands. What you see in that example, you saw a band around the cigarette. When this was first postulated, instead of it being a band, it was a spiral going around the barrel of the cigarette. And a spiral works, because there's always a certain amount of that less porosity on the surface. So that was the first idea. It turns out that it is it's more easy. Wow. More easy. It's easier. It's easier to create with bands than to create and manufacture consistently that spiral. Okay. The impact of the bands on the smokability of the cigarette they knew that a non-ferocity would put out fire. But it's going to put out the fire while somebody's smoking it, that's not a good thing. Okay. So it took experimental design to figure out, how to mitigate that. And then the impact on the bands or on the taste or the desirability of the cigarette. If that is doing that makes cigarette taste funky, then again, that's no longer a desirable thing. Okay? So the conclusions that we reach, we determine the optimal density of the electoral band, we determine the optimal configuration and number of electoral bands. The impact on the band was those bands on the taste or the desirability was determined, and we were able to mitigate that. The impact on the band on the smokability of the cigarette is still in progress. So that part wasn't determined by the time I left the company. However, it was found to be technically feasible. So it was not determined if it was commercially feasible before I left the company. Fact is, since then they did determine that, and so now there are laws in place that say certain amount of the product that cigarette companies sell in various states has to be 5-6 cigarettes. So it was determined. Okay. But that's a different kind of product. However, even with that, there was an effort to discount whatever the cigarette company did. Because people don't like cigarette companies. In general, they don't like cigarette companies. When they don't like you, that means that whatever you do is going to be wrong. Whatever you do, people will not trust. They're going to declare that it's not valid. They won't believe it. But it was hard for them to not believe it when I was reading the study. Because I was trained at the best place in the country. The reputation of my school was on the line when I stood up and said, this is right, this is right. Okay? So, once again, I was in a situation where my own personal credibility assisted in the acceptance of the project. Okay, finally. Okay, understand the severe workers' compensation injuries. I probably need about 20 to 25 minutes to explain this. I'm not going to take that, okay? But what I am going to do is I'm going to try this very briefly. Again, we were at the 10,000 foot level. We're going to fly the plane a little bit higher, okay? So I got 5 minutes. Fly the plane a little bit higher, and let you see it from a 15 or 20,000 foot area, okay? First thing you got to understand is workers' compensation insurance. Workers' compensation insurance is like this. If you're working for a company and you get hurt, you get sick, you get hurt, the cost of your working for a company, then the company has to take care of it. They got to take care of it. So usually they have insurance coverage since they have to take care of it. Okay? Now, if you are hurt and you can't get well, then not only do they have to take care of you with medical treatment, they have to cover your lost wages. And if you can't get well, then they have to pay you for the rest of your life. That's a scary thought for an insurance company. I got to pay this person for the rest of their life. So, the controversy is that most people think the workers' compensation insurance companies try to get you to get well, get paid, go out, do that. And there are bad companies that do think like that. I work for a good company, and the good companies think like this. Nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to be disabled. Nobody wants their life constrained because of some injury. So the good companies believe we want, meaning our employees, we want to get well. And so the good companies try to figure out how you do well, because that's what they believe you want to do, okay? So what we wanted to do was look at do data mining, try to find out if there's anything in data that can help us. The problem is that data is not available. It was not available, or it was not available. Data was not available. The reason data really wasn't available is because insurance companies don't have the right to access those data. Employers, so if I'm working for American College, and I get, hurt on the job. Well, American College has the responsibility of taking care of the injured employees. They have responsibility. They hire somebody to cover those expenses. The money comes from the insurance company, and the managing the claim is taken care of by what they call a third-party administrator, or TPA. Okay? So the insurance company don't have the right to those data. Oftentimes, the employer doesn't have the right to those data. Okay? So if the employer hires TPAs to manage their data, and then to make sure you don't get it, HIPAA privacy laws simply limit the availability of the individual data. If it's rolled up, if it's amalgamated through, you can get data. But individual data you can't get. So, and an employer may have several TPAs. Might be an employer that has a presence in 5 states, may have a different TPA in each state that handles their data. And so, each TPA has their own data system. So that's that. So you never get to, real data. So my company entered into an agreement that made claim-specific cost data available for the first time. So that when we use those data to help us understand the cost predictors of these claims. Very quickly. These two pictures show you what dollars look like over time. So if you get hurt, what happens is, if you have a lot of money immediately, right? Because you're hurt. So you gotta go to the doctor, you gotta pay your salary while you're doing it. So that top picture is the way the flow of money looks like, okay? And if it's an injury that you can heal from, it goes up and it comes back down and you're done, okay? But there are times when the injury doesn't ever go away, even though the picture does show it kind of go away. It doesn't ever go away. When that happens, it usually is the case that it starts off looking just like on the top. But then there's a bump, and it goes back up again, and when it goes back up, it never comes down. Okay? Those are cost projections. So, the thing is, can we predict that second bump? If we could predict that second bump, then we got a shot at helping you. So, what we did was, it took thousands of man to get the data in a data set that was accessible, that was clean, and what I call parsimonious. In other words, all of the data is formatted the same way so that you can actually do searches and modeling and true data mining, okay? Then I modeled those cost trajectories on hundreds of claims, and I mined the cost trajectories against other data to identify similar patterns of expenses. I found out, and this is big stuff right here. I found out that if somebody has a back injury, so that's something happens, right? So back injury is going to get a cost for all the treatment and so on and so forth, and typically you'll get a cost for trying to get a back surgery. Okay? Now, so what I found out was, after the first, if there is a second MRI, that second MRI usually indicates that the patient and their doctor, the claimant and their doctor, are talking about getting another back surgery. Well, that's the indicator. So if you can monitor these things, when you see that second MRI, you can intervene in the trajectory of the person's illness and of the cost, of course, and you can give them state-of-the-art vaccine. So what we did was we created a claims management unit to monitor these trajectories. The claims management unit recommended best practices back here for claims. And within 2 years of me doing this work, we had identified two claimants who were considering back surgery, that second back surgery. And we interacted with them and were able to get them to not do that, but to use the best practices for back recovery, for recovery to back injury. And the neat thing is, one of those patients actually recovered completely. That recovery saved the company at least $2 million. Plus, the injured party recovered. So that's the thing for me, is speaking the language of research is. In the survey example, I needed to speak the language of research to ensure the target population would reap the benefits that additional attention and funding would bring to the glaucoma space, while establishing professional credibility for the institutions that are represented. In the 5-stage figure example, speaking the language of research allowed me to quickly and efficiently answer the questions posed, which saved the company a significant amount of money. By the way, I didn't get any of that money, but it did save the company a significant amount of money. My credibility helped the regulatory organization feel comfortable that nothing had been hidden or obfuscated in the work. And ultimately, lives were saved through the adoption of 5-stage figures. That's actually true. That's documented. And as I mentioned in the example I just mentioned, the work that I did, data mining those data, which was truly a yeoman's job to pull it together, and a truly creative way to mine those data, using not just the incident, but to mine the cost trajectory, we were able to save, mitigate the pain and suffering for the claimant, and save particularly a couple $1 million for the company. So, that's what I do, speaking the language of research. And if you find it interesting, talk to me, let me know, or, but like I said, truly, follow your passion. This is what happens when I follow mine. I appreciate your time and attention. Thanks so much. Y'all be ready.